Give it just a second. All right, it looks like it is recording now. So we can go ahead and call our meeting to order. I'm gonna jump ahead so I know Ben is walking in. We can call it to order since we don't have our chair isn't present. You all can either have the most senior person on ASAC lead, which is Christina, or nominate someone else to run the meeting via a motion and then a second. Our records, we dug through it just in case, and our records indicate that Christina, I believe, is the most senior member on our board. So if you all would like to.
I'm
Motion second. Do we have a second? Okay, okay.
So call the meeting to order at 12:07. Do we have any citizens present to make comment? Okay. There are no citizens present at this time wishing to make comments. The first on our agenda item, be able to go in order?
Yes.
Okay. First on our agenda item is receive comments from Farmers Branch City Manager.
Yes.
It's going to watch.
We told you.
Oh, yeah, you did. Here I am. My apologies for my tardiness. Thank you all for being patient. I was on the phone call with another governmental organization. It's a hot topic right now, and I wanted to make sure that call had the ending I was hoping for, so we continue to move forward and make progress. So that's a mouthful right there about working with the TRA to get to a solution for the residents of Farmers Branch. Well, I try and make it around once a year to all the different boards and commissions, and sometimes it's hard to do, so I just throw it on my calendar and I show up, and here I am, and I just want to make sure there's always a chance for you all as residents to, one, have access to your city manager. I serve all of you all. I do work for the city council, but I'm a resident, serve the residents, here for you all. But part of that is I just want to make sure if you have any questions for me, where the city's going, how I feel about anything. I know there's opportunities at the animal shelter from a structural standpoint. My team is working hard to figure out what that is. There's limited money and a limited need in the entire city, so it's always that balancing act. We are trying to use the gift donation that was there to help bridge some of those concerns, and also look at just programming and ways to leverage our community as a help resource as well, beyond just more space, more space. The animal shelter is in an awkward spot, and it's one of those, it's a tough one to get too creative. We are aware of those challenges. We are exploring partnerships. We never stop, right? We know we have the police department next door. We have the college next to us. Unfortunately, next to the college, it goes straight down and there's a creek down there, which usually indicates a FEMA floodplain in most cases, because there's a lot of floodplain around the college and where they've built it. But from that standpoint, it's just one of those, I'm really excited about the changes we're making at the animal shelter. I've always been really proud of the animal shelter. The one thing I love the most is you walk in and it doesn't smell like an animal shelter. You've all been to those, even a pet store, right? You go in there and it smells like feces, pee. The animals look distraught. The team that's there loves animals. I'm not a fan of snakes, but I see some of the attendants over there walking around with snakes around. I'm like, yeah, that's you. That's not me. You know, I like kittens and puppies. But it's also one of those to make sure, you know, we haven't forgotten the animal shelter. And so early last year, we merged fleet and facilities into the finance department to restructure and streamline the departments, because there were some struggles with budget reporting that we needed finance to fix in fleet and facilities, and they have. But they're guiding a lot of the changes you'd see at the animal shelter, and they're actively working on those as well. This is not a new conversation. The animal shelter was built about 15 years ago, and 5 years later, it was already on council agendas to, hey, it needs to be expanded, this needs to happen, and all the data was there. And unfortunately, from what I recall from the meeting minutes, is the data was reported inaccurately to the council, and Jennifer's been made aware of that. Here's where the data was, here's where the data is. But what can we do to leverage and move forward with the existing footprint? So we're gonna get a little bit creative, and I've walked it with Jennifer. I've walked it with finance, fleet, facilities. I haven't walked it yet, but it's on my to-do list. Perfect. But it's how can we be creative in leveraging and maximizing the space? And again, being respectful of the limited tax dollars we have for the facility, but it's coming. What you got? Oh, the hand is up.
Well, you know my passion.
I do.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. I love passion, because you're not passionate. Come on. Gotta be passionate.
Well, just like we had a subcommittee for the nature preserve. We had a subcommittee for the dog park. And of course, I was on all those, and a subcommittee for the Hoya playground. But I think Champion ran that. But are we gonna have a consulting firm to work with the city to determine what the needs are, to make sure that, you know, there's a full understanding by everyone of what is really needed and what can be done? Because we do have a lot of extra, I guess, footage in front of the shelter. And so that can be expanded, and what about a water tank? And so that could be useful part, so that, you know, maybe a consultant would see some of that. And, yeah, I've had 25 years in consulting. But,
So I've walked the site with multiple city managers, even before I was city manager. I walked it with John, I walked it with Charles, I
Yeah.
walked it with 3 different shelter managers.
Yeah.
To me, the data is the most important thing. What is our intake and outtake? So what is our capacity at the shelter and how are we managing that capacity and that utilization of the shelter? From the other standpoint of it, I feel like I have the best resources, the staff, the professionals that run the shelter,
I
and then
agree.
my boards that provide input, council boards that provide input on it from a common sense perspective. But I've walked that shelter, even my finance team was like, we need this and that. It's not a complex problem. It's more of how much we need a consultant for design, but we know the space that we need to be successful. It's not a mystery. We know what we need. But what I do know is with the limited budget, the way I approach these types of situations is I build a pathway to get there over time. Because usually I won't have all the money up front unless it's a bond election. I don't have just extra millions of dollars just sitting there waiting to allocate towards it. So what I do is I put us in an alignment that allows us to methodically build towards it. So the first thing is gonna be is parking's an issue. That trailer and where it sits is an issue. That weird little entrance up there is an issue. Where the out place goes for the dogs, the dog run is issue. So we've already talked.
Storage.
Yeah, it's all in the Sally Port is the way it's structured is an issue. The rabies quarantine that you can't even open because there's this in the way of it's an issue. There's a lot of issues, but I look at those as opportunities, and I don't need a consultant in all fairness to say, hey, what we know what they are. What I would like to do is use my team to bring forward ideas, run them by the board to make sure, hey, here's what we're thinking, here's the thoughts and process we're building towards. And then from the board, it would move to the city council. We do have the donation to help us start the journey. And then I've methodically programmed in it as well, because we consider things like the AC unit needs to be replaced. Well, somebody said, well, can we put it on the roof? We can, it costs a lot of money, but it doesn't really get me any space that's usable. It gets it off the ground. Well, now the AC unit that sits in front of the building, that little, separate like 3.5 ton unit, that's easily movable to the roof without much of an issue, because the problem with the building was never designed to be more than it is. So if we expand, we have to be anything that goes vertical, it gets exponentially more expensive because it wasn't designed to be that way. So really we have to kind of creep out.
Yeah.
Parking in front of the water tower's already been looked at, and that was from the previous presentation, I think in 2015, 2017, somewhere in there, that showed what this potential space could be. But we're aware of that, but we do need to fix the parking and the flow. I need that trailer to find a home that's easier for my team. I don't know how they move that thing. I can't even move a boat in my setback. It's work, so I don't know how they do it.
Carefully with emergency lights, stopping the traffic.
Well, at our last meeting, we did a tour,
Mhm.
and at that time, Operation Kindness was there doing surgeries.
Mhm.
And of course, cats were coming out of anesthesia, sitting on top of a box, on a cart. There was another, dog being neutered or spayed. And, that's not a good environment to have surgeries going on.
Yeah.
When, pets are on top of boxes and crates and people are on top of each other. And, we appreciate the fact that the shelter manager previously was smart enough to partner with Operation Kindness, which is really a blessing. But anyway, so there are a lot of concerns.
There are, and it's one of those, we didn't get into this challenge overnight. And so the way I build out of it, just like any challenges, I look at how fast we got into it. And that usually tells me how long the recovery back out of it is as well. And so, yes, there are concerns, but it's how, one, from a management perspective, what can we do to shift our operational stances to address those concerns in the interim? And then from an infrastructure standpoint, how do we move forward? What's the long-term vision and goal? And I believe everybody's in agreement. The parking needs to be a little bit better, these seem more well thought out. Like the parking right now, even driving just a car back in there, trying to leave that exit, it's almost impossible. I don't know how people do it. We need more space for surge capacity, but we also need better volunteer programs for fostering as well. And that's one of the big highlights, because most folks that foster, when you have a puppy or a kitten, you really don't want to let go of your kid. So it's twofold, right? And then there's partnerships with private organizations like Operation Kindness. I've seen some stores will even have places where you can put adoptable animals there in the store, so for visibility. So exploring those partnerships. The volunteer program is huge. It's never really been fully developed. It's always been talked about. And so I know these are on the goal and to-do list, is how do we leverage our volunteers to be part of the solution as well? So there's a lot of balancing between the two. The 1.5 million we have in donations is a big start, but there's strings attached to that. It's very focused on cats. I don't have as much of a cat issue as I do a dog issue, for all fairness, based on the data I've seen. I'm a data person. Remove the emotion, remove the assumptions. What's the data tell me that we need versus what we have, and how do we start bridging that? But, the fact that y'all are sharing the concerns, and staff has shared the concerns as well, it's not falling on deaf ears, but it's also, I want to make sure when we identify a solution, it's not a knee-jerk solution. It's been well thought out. and it makes sense for the community and the future of Farmers Branch. I need a solution that's not for today, but for 10, 20 years from now, because we're close to build out. But we keep looking at things from today. I need this today, today, today. What do we need from 10 years and 20 years from now? And we're on that pathway right now. They know the direction I've given, which is sustainable, resilient to the future. Let's not make the same mistakes we made in the past where we built something that we thought was good for now, maybe a couple years. Let's finish the journey. And what does that look like? In all fairness, it may have been a different building altogether at a different location, but I went and looked at the old animal shelter because I some public work. We've made progress. I never want to diminish how far we've come.
Yeah,
We still have a ways to go, and we're never saying that will never be the case, but I believe between you all and the staff, y'all can tell us what we need at the animal shelter better than anyone. You all know this
staff
community.
is awesome.
Yeah, and not anything against consultants, but when outside consultants come in, sometimes they're trying to make a name for themselves, make it shiny, and that's great. But I really want somebody that knows the heart of Farmers Branch, and that's the employees and the staff. They love the job, they love what they're here to do, they love the community. That's where you get real solutions that fit versus, well, I made it really cool and fancy. No,
We don't need that.
and we don't need that. So I'd rather us be functional and for the needs of the community. And we're on the right path and we have to build this into the budget for next year. So it's coming. But I believe Jennifer's got a presentation coming in July to keep this going on council and keep the discussion going, kind of let them know where we're at from all these processes coming together and what it looks like to build it to the future. I know they've been in contact with the executor for the estate as well. So they're doing all the things they can in the background, but also looking at solutions. Now, I hate to throw money at a consultant, so I'm ready to design and y'all are good. Yeah, I hate to throw money away.
Because Tina Bennett at the last meeting said, we need a consultant to see what we really need.
And that's usually
We've got
40 to 50 grand, yeah. Yeah.
And you have a great hire over here. Tyler is awesome.
You know, Tyler does a great job and, relocating to come here and work at our animal shelter is a strong testament to the team. He's got a great team working with him over there. You've met the team. When Sarah left, she left to follow her dream, which I love. I hate losing employees, but if you're following your dream, it's a powerful thing, and that's a great place to be. But no, all of y'all's feedback and concerns have been heard. I just want to make sure we don't spin our wheels in bureaucracy. Let's find out what we need. And I think we're pretty close on understanding that. Make sure everybody's in agreement, move it forward through the process, still follow the process. So the committee here will look at it, review, and hopefully give a stamp of approval, and then we'll move to the council who ultimately will decide. And then from there, we'll move forward. But it's a plan for today that builds to tomorrow. And with the money we have, we're just very, very fortunate to have that donation. Otherwise, we'd be in a hurting spot.
I think we spent 6 months with Jerry Pendry and Tim O'Hare getting the current shelter the way it is. And I don't think it's, there have been years thinking about this new one, or not a new one, but the growth.
Mhm.
So that's good.
So we're in a good spot, and I believe we're building in the right direction. We have the right people, which is the most important thing. You can't do this if you don't have the right team leading the charge. You need the experts to do it that know all the rules. I mean, he's already shown me some new rules I didn't know about, like raccoons. I was like, wait, we're not allowed to move the raccoons? I was like, oh, who knew? So, it's already been, having egrets relocated that were orphaned in the storm. I mean, yeah, they're annoying birds, but they're still live animals. And what do you do when they're helpless? And, relocating them to Cleburne, I mean, that's what we're about here. And it's the things they do behind the scenes. There was never anything out there like, look what we're doing. But I didn't know this. I realize now there are people out there watching what we were doing, but we're just always do the right thing. It's a really simple equation for what we do. But it's one of those, the shelter I know will be a big topic. I don't anticipate it being any less of a topic in the near future. But when we rush, we make mistakes. I'm always cautious with my team as there's a time to rush. We've got time. But we know we have problems. But we'll get there.
They've been taking their time. It's been kicked down the road.
Well, it's a new team, and I have a feeling they're not kicking it down the road. So they're in alignment, and the fact that it's back on the council agenda shows that it's coming. But I didn't want to. It's really tough for me to hire consultants sometimes because it's a lot of money.
Well, I'm good with it, consultants, but that's what was mentioned in the last meeting. So I'm just following on the bandwagon because I thought, well, you're not going to do anything unless you get one. So.
There's a time and a place for them, and if council wants to, I will fully support whatever direction the council wants. I don't think I need one.
I don't think so either, but okay, that was presented, not by me, but by somebody else.
And sometimes when the council are having a meeting, there's 6 council members up there, and sometimes you'll get a lot of different opinions. The magic number for me is 3. When 3 say it, that's direction. Otherwise, it's ideas and thoughts that I have to make sure I'm considerate of and that I follow back up on. But when 3 speak, well, I mean, 3 council members, but when 3 voting members of the council say something, that's direction. And I have to follow. So 3 of them would have said consultant, if there's a consultant coming, I'll clarify.
Yeah.
But right now, that was just conversation.
Okay. All right.
And if council member Bennett was still on the council, I would definitely have followed up with her and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. But right now I don't have any feedback loops.
No, I think not having it, I think it'll just slow us down.
Yeah.
Because we've spent 5 years
Yes,
thinking.
we're getting the budget. Here we go. It's coming. There's lots of projects. I'm happy to close out other projects and move our focus. To what else? Any other questions? I see the name tag. I'll call on you, Diana. Well, I'm here. What would you like to know? I love being on this side. What would you like? It can be about anything. I mean, I'm here to comments. I know it's the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, but I'm your city manager. You can ask me anything. It doesn't bother me.
You know, I'm just barely getting to know I've always had a love of animals. Right now, I'm actually fostering 2 kittens.
Love that.
Without the help of agencies, it's really hard to place little kittens because the one placement that we got from them just fell through this morning. So I'm really down right now. It's like, but this is all new to me. I mean, the way shelters work, I've never done this before, so I don't really have any questions because I'm too ignorant to know what I don't know. But every time I come here, I learn something new.
Well, stay
So it's
curious.
really more of a comment than it is a question. All these people who've been doing this for a while always have some wonderful ideas, and I'm grateful to
I
be.
could listen to her.
Yes, she's a wealth of
She is a
knowledge.
wealth of knowledge.
She really is.
I'll say the one thing that I've always found is just because you don't have a familiarity with it, that's usually a benefit because you're not going to come with any preconceived
Right.
notions of how it should be.
Right.
And so it's a very good perspective to have. And service is service. So I appreciate you for doing that as well.
That's-
I adopted one of my cats from the shelter. His name was Rocket. He was a fast little sprightly kitten. Rocket turned into a large. And so, so he's a chunk right now. He's a big cat. I still love him to death, but he was no longer the sprightly little kitten that ran all over the place and I had to catch. But he's the favorite by far. But no, absolutely. It's one of those, if you have questions though, you'll see me around
Yeah.
quite often. Just feel
My
free.
husband calls me the cat whisperer. The cat that we have right now, I work down by a courthouse that has right between the SPCA and the Dallas shelter. And so I think people dump their animals all the time. And we have this beautiful little calico that was clean. And I just thought, if I get her and I foster her and get her to be nice, I can find a home for her. 6 months later, she was the nicest cat you've ever met, but it was a foster fail, like you said. My husband said, "You are not finding a home for this cat. She is ours." So, so I've never worked, like I said, I've never worked with shelters because it's always been okay, I do it myself. And then I finally decided, that's crazy.
Uh-huh.
I can't take this on by myself. I need to work with others.
A lot of credit goes to the staff over there as well, because the shelter's a part of what they do, but a lot of what they do is the on-call, the weekends, picking up dead animals. They do a lot of heart-wrenching things. It's a thankless job. It's hidden, but critically important to the city as well. And I mean, it's a love and a passion for animals, and they really do a great job over there. What you got?
Anything?
Anything?
Can you confirm that yesterday TRA committed to not purchasing the 12.5 acres at Luna Valley View for their site?
Unfortunately, they did not confirm that. And so they spoke in a lot of, smoke and mirrors, like we might do this, we could do this, the ink deal hasn't been inked yet. Until they put it in writing, it's black and white. It doesn't exist in my world. I need it written down and affirmed by somebody who has authority to speak. In that instance, that group did not have the authority to speak on behalf of the TRA. I believe the person I was talking to on the way here had that authority to speak, and we have a dialogue and a firm understanding of where the city of Farmers Branch sits today with that project and how my residents feel. And I've been told by the council to be the messenger, so I will be at their next board meeting and I will be talking to them. So
I'm sorry, TRA is,
Trinity River.
gotcha.
I live in gatherings across.
oh, you're next door, yeah.
Literally next door. I've written, I think, 25 emails in the last 2 days. All the state reps, the council members, the TRA officials,
And that's the most
County
important thing you can do is the TRA is governed, they're a board, they're appointed by the governor and they're a state agency or quasi state agency. So we really have no authority to regulate anything. There's a lot of questions about zoning last night. We can't. It's another governmental agency. We have no authority to regulate them outside of health and safety, which even then it can't be abnormal to what we already regulate. We can't change the rules because they're coming. And so just like any other project, but that's just how government works, and it's kind of makes us play nice together. But sometimes these are the situations you end up in. But earlier last year, we had this stockpile at 6:35 that was for 2 years ago now. And that was TxDOT. No matter what we did, they could come and apologize all day long. Nothing mattered. And then where Mercer Park's going to be, where those townhomes are coming in, Centurion was putting in those townhomes. They had a big pile of dirt. Told me to be gone in 6 weeks. It wasn't. So kept getting lip service. I called them before council. I said, I'm not your messenger. You need to come talk to my council. And Councilman Roman lit them up. And rightfully so, because you're going to tell me one thing and not deliver. That's not fair. And so, but I feel like this was the same thing. I appreciate the residents being involved because that groundswell of support is something I can't replicate. I can go and say, we don't want this, but when there's 500 people behind me, it makes it much easier to be heard and your message is better to the highest levels. And we're not going to stop.
Just
Well, and you also, every map that was ever shown of the development, there's a grocery store logo sitting on that parcel. Now, whether it'll ever be or not. So that's also what was promised. Now, it's not a promise in writing and we can't enforce it. We don't own the property and it's expensive property, but we can still work on solutions. And so my new director of economic development for planning, Perla, she's on. And she's actually taking the baton from me. I had my phone call to set the stage and now she's taking the next part of the conversation. And hopefully we'll have an update to share with the community and the council first in the community. Hopefully within a week or two, but as long as the deal hasn't been, we're
5+ communities, so there are folks living there for whom that would be a health hazard. They're gonna be mixing concrete and stirring up dirt and.
yeah, the original plan was a full batching plant where they take the 18-wheeler and turn it on its side. So 35 and 635 in between the highways there, you see that batching plant that's there. That's originally what they told me. And I was like, this isn't going to work. Community's going to come unglued. The council's going to come unglued. They were warned. They said, this is going to happen. This is what you're planning on presenting, but you need to come talk to the council. And I believe now they understand that that wasn't an exaggeration. So thank you all for showing up. It's very, very important. Taking time out of your day to come speak and make sure you'll know that the council's on your side, the staff on your side. First, we'd heard of this was 2 months ago, but even then we had to get details and we want to make sure we had facts straight. If we just say, hey, this is coming, we have nothing else, it's going to do nothing but frustrate everyone. So the timeline's working. We'll see if we can hopefully have a good outcome, but I'm doing everything I can. Christina, do you work at a shelter?
Yeah.
Grapevine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do read some. What do you do at the Grapevine shelter?
Manager.
Okay. So you live in Farmers Branch and work in Grapevine?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I used to work at shelter for a long time. So what do you have for me? Any questions?
I don't have questions. I'm just here to be a resource to Tyler and everyone else.
Thankful.
It's very, very much appreciated. If you ever have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out. I don't know how many people in the city of Grapevine. I think the city manager and mayor's been there for, I believe. Matt Farian's a good friend of mine from back in the day. I think he's your budget manager now. He's a good guy and actually used to work here and she now works doing the neighborhood block grant program. So known them since I was emergency manager with Matt way back in the day. Well, that's all the board members that are here. Anybody else? Y'all question? Y'all. Is there anything else from anybody? Christy, for closing the look back with you, is there any
No.
lingering questions? You know how to reach me.
Yeah, I do. I know where you sit.
Yeah, I run around City Hall pretty often. But any of you all, you're all residents. I'm here for any of you all. Should you all need anything at all, thank you for your service. Is the biggest and most important thing. This is service. It really is. You're taking time out of your day. Maybe you're taking time off from work to come and volunteer for the City of Farmers Branch. And that's critically important. So as you're having these meetings, it's important to make sure they're valuable and respect your time. I think by rule, you'll have to meet 3 times a year, but I believe you'll meet 4 just to be safe. And so.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's enough, but okay.
Well, working with your staff liaisons, you can have more depending on the cadence of it. I just know I'm aware of the minimum, so I make sure we don't break any rules. But it's one that, it probably as the renovation heats up a little bit, there's probably as that conversation heats up, maybe you need to meet more once council gives final direction on it as well and kind of giving feedback calls to the staff on it. But, there's been a lot of improvements over the years as well. When I first got the shelters, one of my departments or divisions was sustainability back in the day. There's no protection from staff, wide open. You could just walk back there and and they had all this just donations. Like they had like a little market in the front of it and it was all just thrown together and cash just sitting out like, oh, okay, we gotta fix something. So we've come a really long way in cleaning up the efficiencies over there, but also the thing that's never changed is the staff's commitment level to the animal, their love of the animals, how clean that shelter is. It is a clean shelter. I get on surgery day, it may not be as clean. I'm not a needle person like Sarah told me back in the day and I had needles. I'm like, I don't usually do well with needles.
Yeah.
So like, you can put those away. But, you know, I understand to be a licensed animal control officer, you have to euthanize an, I can't imagine that. So I have a lot of respect for the employees that work there and the work that they do. Again, for Tyler taking over the leadership you've shown in just a quick time and hit the ground running. We're not a slow moving city, right? We move very fast.
Yep.
It's one of those, you know, some folks come in, they're like, hey, you want your 90-day plan? It's like, yeah, 90-day plan, start today, do everything, do your job, let's go. You know, it's one of those, we don't have time to just go slow in certain instances, especially when it comes to day-to-day operations. So, and again, the egrets they've steered right into, which is tough because they're a protected class of animal and we want to make sure we're respectful of them. So we have our street sweepers running every day. And then if any dikes, unfortunately, I didn't realize that egrets are one of those species that the weaker ones are kicked out of the nest like storks and they're just kind of dropped to die. You know, like, oh, because it's gut wrenching. I park there every day and it's like, but you know, we put up a little barrier this year to try and protect them from just street traffic. So they hopefully don't end up in the street and getting hit. But it's just one of those that they're our yearly visitor now. We're trying to be good neighbors with them as well. But again, if y'all have any questions, but first and foremost, thank you for having me. And if you ever need me, I'm at City Hall. If you need me to come back to one of these meetings and talk to you all, I'm always available as well. But they're the experts on this. I am not on animal services. I know enough from what they taught me, but they're the teachers. And so if it comes to the bigger picture of how the animal services fits into the city and everything else, absolutely. When it comes to day-to-day operations and how we're aligned, that always relies with, that goes with staff. They're the experts on this and they're the ones that should always speak. So if I ever get a complaint, so if somebody sends me emails, I got a complaint about the animal shelter, the first question I always get is, have you talked to the manager?
Yeah.
If not, have you talked to the director or deputy director over, and then the deputy city manager, and then me, because it really, most answers are here. Now, and sometimes, you know, we deal with some stuff. I think there's a neighbor across the street that hears the dogs barking and that really bothers them and we handle it. There's folks that live in Cambridge Crossing that are really bothered by the blue football field. And every year I get a complaint to see if I can change the football field color. That's a no. And even, I think one we give out every couple of years is, can we change the flight paths to DFW? So I'm like,
I don't understand that you can't.
no, if I could, I would, trust me. But it's one of those. But again, you're in good hands. You know, I got a great team. It's a growing team. And I love the fact that it's a resilient team. So even with changes, we don't stop. And, you know, that persistence. But thank you again for your service. And you have new members. Are any of you new members yet, or have they not been sworn in yet?
It's my second year.
Second meeting. Okay, fantastic. Perfect.
New ones will get in July.
July. Okay.
July 16th.
The council made appointments to the new members. So, perfect. Well, thank you all. I'm going to sit back there and work something happen.
Once
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so now let's consider the meeting minutes from our March 20th. Advisory committee meeting, they're attached in the packet here. After we review them, we would need to have a motion to approve them in second unless someone has changes that need to be addressed, and those would be brought forward.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Our next meeting agenda item is to receive updates on the shelter metrics for the court.
Perfect. Let's see if I can work this thing. Let's see. Say it gets hot and then cold. Okay, perfect. So I'm not going to read my entire bio to you all, but I'm so happy to be here. Happy to be in Farmers Branch. My name is Tyler. I'm the new shelter manager for the city of Farmers Branch Animal Services. Prior to working in Farmers Branch, I worked for the Humane Society of the United States, and I helped oversee our law enforcement training center. So my job at HSUS was to liaise with law enforcement agencies and shelters across the country and identify areas of opportunities where they might need improvements, and I help them develop curriculum and deliver that training. So I worked a lot on our logistics. I worked a lot with our law enforcement agencies and our shelter operations, but I also taught several classes. So I taught animal cruelty and fighting investigations. Fortunately, knock on wood, I don't think we have a lot of animal fighting that goes on in our area, but hope I don't have to draw on that knowledge. I teach verbal de-escalation, community-oriented policing. So I work on a project with the Department of Justice to take their community-oriented policing class that they deliver to law enforcement agencies and adapt that to animal control use. So it's a little bit about my background. I lived in El Paso prior to moving here. I oversaw field operations for the El Paso County Animal Welfare Department. I was just an ACO there, and we had a fairly novel idea, which was to take foreign veterinarians and train them at a clinic that the county paid for. And so we were able to get these folks in as veterinary residents, as we call them, train them, and they are now on the path to getting their certification in the state of Texas veterinarian. So that's a little bit about my background. The enforcement side, I know a lot about. That's really where my comfort level lies, but I'm so excited to be here in Farmers Ranch and oversee our shelter. I also work for the city of San Antonio, which again, another large city as well. So here are our shelter numbers and our metrics, and I took the format that was previously presented and just copied and pasted the numbers that matched. At the end, I would like to have some discussion about the potential of kind of reworking this and what numbers you all would like to see, because I don't think that this shows a full storyboard that our staff is doing, all the good things that we do. But I wanted to keep the format the same and not change it up on my first meeting, so we can walk through all these numbers. So here's our intake numbers. So this includes all animals. So wildlife, dogs, cats, pocket pets, and other. We took in a total of 406 animals during this time period. We had 360 outcomes. So that includes adoption, foster, well, not foster, so adoption, sending those animals to rescue groups, medical care, euthanasia as well. So this is the total outcome. Here's our adoption. So you can see adoptions went down slightly. There wasn't a number on here that accounts for length of stay, but our length of stay in our shelter has gone up slightly over the past year. I believe this time last year, we were at about 7 or so days, and right now we're at about 12 days. So length of stay has increased for all of our animals in our care. And then these are the RTO numbers as well. So this RTO metric here, we are working, and so the shelter system that we use is PetPoint. We are working in PetPoint to retool some of the reporting statistics because I want to see what is getting returned to owner over the counter, what's getting returned to the owner in the field. I want to know that breakdown, that granular level data. And right now we're not able to capture that. So we're working in our system to change that. So I'm hoping to see some of these RTO numbers broken down a little better because I want to know the number of animals that are getting returned by our officers versus people that are coming into the shelter to reclaim those animals. I've also given direction to our staff to implant animals with microchips in the field as they're being returned. So that was not something that we had previously done, but I got permission from city management to have our officers do that. So any animal that our officers can safely microchip in the field is getting done before it's returned to the owner. So it makes us comply with our state ordinance where microchips are required. And I'm hoping that that program helps boost our RTO numbers a little bit in the future. So here's again, intake, outcome, adoption, RTOs. Does anybody have questions about these numbers?
No, but I'd like to see more.
Yeah. And so what I would like to do, and again, we can talk about this at the end, is break these numbers down a little bit because I want to know the intake, how many were owner surrendered, the reasons why they were owner surrendered. So maybe there's some options for intervention from us. I want to know the number of animals that have come in from the field. And I want to be able to present that all to you in a nice, fashion. So you all know the breakdown of these numbers, but that's what I would like to move forward with for our next meeting. Any other questions? No.
No, it would be nice to see, how many rescues
Yeah.
have been involved in taking out some of the mostly dogs.
Yeah,
Because that would be good to know. So
And-
we could really develop those relationships.
absolutely. And so that's something that I've looked at internally is running that report to seeing which rescue groups we're working with the most. So if you would like that number included, I can provide you a breakdown of each rescue that's pulled animals from us. So that's something that I can include as well. But the idea is essentially to provide not just this high level number for you all. I want to go in and break those numbers down, what every line item looks like for a shelter. Because it's easy to do. We just had to make some changes in our reporting internally to make that happen. So we've got about a month a month's worth of this information, but we didn't have it previously, so it wasn't super helpful to include it. But moving forward, we'll have this kind of granular level data that we can report out.
Yeah, we're accustomed to seeing this.
Yeah. And and again, looking through it, I want to tell you the true story of the scope of the work that we're doing. And these numbers, they're sufficient, for what you all were asking for, but I want to go a little bit deeper. So again, here is kind of the same setup. So these are the animals that were serviced in through our clinic. This number is a little bit higher than last year because we have started to vaccinate animals for the public when needed. So if folks are calling in for an owner surrender, we are having them come in if we don't have the capacity that day, because as you all know, we are scheduling owner surrenders out for several weeks. That's something that I'm working on kind of reeling in a little bit. But in the meantime, until I can totally kind of revamp that process, we're having those folks come in so we can vaccinate their animals. So at least they have 2 weeks of, the immunization built up for 2 weeks before they come into our care. So these numbers are a little bit higher than last year, but that's why we're vaccinating more of the public's animals, preempting that they're going to come into our care at some point. So these are the number of animals that have been transferred out to other agencies. So maybe they were reclaimed by Dallas Animal Services, Operation Kindness, or pulled in by a rescue group. That's 35. Wildlife release. So this is another number. This is a little bit lower than it has been in the past. And the reason is we have stopped trapping wildlife in Farmers Branch. So we are no longer trapping healthy wildlife.
Why do you know that?
It's in our internal policies. It's been posted to our city website that it says City of Farmers Branch follows TPWD directions, so Texas Parks and Wildlife, to not trap healthy wild animals. So that is the direction that we've moved towards. So these numbers are a little bit lower than they have been in the past.
I was thinking of skunks and,
Right. And so this is just healthy. We are not trapping healthy animals. If somebody calls in and says if there's a sick or an injured animal, or an animal that poses a public safety threat or a risk of like zoonosis, or it's been exposed to their pet, we're going out and we're still trapping those animals. But healthy wildlife, we are no longer.
yeah, that's good. Somebody's pet could get trapped.
Right. Well, and the other thing too is legally to trap raccoons and relocate them, we have to get a permit. There's not really an exemption for animal control agencies. Texas Parks and Wildlife gives us a lot of wiggle room there, but the law says that we have to have a permit to do that, and we do not have a permit specifically for those raccoons. So anyway, we have stopped trapping healthy wildlife in our city. We're no longer relocating them unless it poses a public safety threat or they're sick, injured, or other. So that number is lower as well. And then the deceased animal pickup. So these are the animals that have come in through our C-Click Fix app, or folks have called into the shelter. This is the total number. This does not account for the egret situation at City Hall. We picked up over 300 egrets over the course of a week. This does not account for that number. I pulled that data out because it skews it wildly, but we did pick up several hundred egrets, deceased, and other that were sent to wildlife partners. So any questions about this data? And again, this is another one. I would like to break this down to more granular level data. For the clinic, I want to see what microchips our officers implanted in the field. Now that they're able to do that, I want to see what animals are coming in to get those services. We'll break that down a little bit farther. And then transfers as well. I think this is where I can put in your information for what rescues have pulled animals from us. And then wildlife release will probably not be included because we shouldn't be releasing wildlife in the future. So these are our field calls. So this is the total number of cases and activities that our officers responded to for this time period. I will say that this accounts for every single activity. So if there were 2 officers that went out to 1 call, it's counted twice in these numbers. That's how it has been reported in the past. So that's how I kept it. In the future, again, we'll break down this call volume or this total call volume to show these are the number of at-large calls. This is the number of dog bites that we had, those types of, I think that would be more helpful as a group to go through. So again, we'll break this information down. Phone calls, so this is the total number of calls that our shelter serviced over this time period. So again, 4,604. Our phone, I can't confirm, never stops ringing. It just rings all day long. Fortunately, people answer. I mean, we're great and people answer the phone, but it never stops ringing. So 4,600 phone calls. A lot of those are information requests or, access to resources, those types of things. This is the number of cases presented or reported through our FETX Connect app, so the reporting app that we have. We had 167 cases. I looked through, and again, I want to provide you all a granular level breakdown, but most of these were information calls. A lot of folks were calling requesting information on TNR, so trap, neuter, return for cats, for our feral cat colonies. And then there were more that were for like stray roaming at-large animals. And then this is the total number of at-large animal calls that we service through our Pet Point system and through FBTX Connect. Any questions here? These numbers? No? Okay. And so if anybody follows us, I'm going to talk about our social media first. If anyone follows us on social media, you've probably seen that Jennifer did a super great job when she was at the shelter, kind of building our social media profile. And one of our staff members is super adept at social media, not I, but we've been able to turn that over. And she's done a really, really great job in revamping kind of our social media presence. We've been able to create this kind of brand for our shelter with just utilizing the city colors and very similar formatting. So our staff can kind of just plug and play. It's no longer having to sit there for, 30 minutes creating one animal profile. They're able to just kind of plug and play and get these animals on social media. So our social media presence has increased 2,000%, or the engagement has increased 2,000%. I pulled the Facebook Meta Business Suite. So we've had a 2,000% increase in our social media, which is great. But anyway, I just wanted to highlight that we're getting that on track. Our social media, we've had a lot of folks offering support, which is great. And then what else do we have on here? So we've also, with the, not trapping wildlife anymore, we're no longer loaning our traps out for those purposes. So we've been able to reallocate that and get those traps back into the hands of folks who are trapping feral cats. So we've been able to reallocate those wildlife traps and use them as feral cat traps, which has helped. We've been able to pick up a lot more TNR cats and get those animals back out, get them fixed, and then return back into the field. And then I just wanted to highlight too the Operation Kindness Partnership. They're still coming in once a week and providing a lot of sterilization services for the shelter. I will say, as you are an advisory committee, we've been approached by a couple other veterinarians as well who would like to offer their services for free to us. So that's something that we're looking at. Obviously, I'm not going to turn down free medical care. So that's something on the horizon, which hopefully I can report positively on at our next meeting, as how we've been able to have these community vets provide services to us. And then the thing I feel like the team and myself are most proud about is our expanded capacity for foster care. So right now the shelter is dealing with a ringworm issue and also feline panleukopenia issue. We've been able to keep those animals in our care and provide care for them and treat them. But the reason I've been able to do that is because we were able to shift a lot of our cats and kittens into foster care, which has allowed us to free up those rooms to provide appropriate isolation and quarantine from other animals for those pets. And then also on the disease front, we've been able to use a partnership with a private veterinarian to actually house those animals at their facility, so they're no longer in our care, they're providing care for them. So we just have to kind of maintain those isolation areas. But the foster program has really taken off. We've got 40 animals currently in foster care. This week, we started having some of them come back in for medical care, so sterilization surgeries, vaccines, those types of things. But 40 animals in foster care.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a huge win for us. It's the only reason that we were able to provide the care to our sick population at our shelter and not have to make, those difficult decisions. And then around 19, I think it's up to like 25 families now are now interested in adopting their foster. So we have a pretty good foster fail rate, which is exciting. We want them to stay. So that's kind of our wins.
Yes.
Yes.
Social media presence.
So that's on Facebook and Instagram.
And Jeff Brady.
And Jeff Brady, he's done some things with us as well. But we've really been a lot more active in just utilizing social media to let people know that we're here and we need their help. And also it's been helpful for us to get our long-term animals more attention. We've been able to either move them into foster care, so they're not, deteriorating in shelter care. And it's been super helpful with that as well. So if you go to our Facebook, you'll see that we've been pretty active on social media for the last month or so.
Yeah, Jeff Brady is doing a good job doing a feature of the dog.
Yeah, he's been doing a great job. We send over usually one of our long stay animals
Yeah.
every week with a cute little bio and a picture, and he's done a great job of including them in the newsletter as well. All right, and then I just wanted to highlight a couple more wins. So these are two cats. So Chewy came in to us. Chewy was unfortunately hit by a car. He needed to have his leg amputated, as you can see there. And then Nola on the right is a small kitten. It's hard to tell, but she also had a back leg amputated. So this is possible because of our partnership. One, Operation Kindness is coming in and providing services to us at no cost. So it's freed up a little bit of our budget to be able to provide more extensive care to animals. So Chewy and Nola, they've been at North Dallas Vet receiving care. Both of these animals went in for amputations. They came back for a very short recovery stint at our shelter, and they've since been adopted into permanent homes. So just wanted to highlight that. We've got a lot of good community partnerships and a lot of good things going our way. And these two cats are, they're the prime example of that. Anyone have any questions? I know I went through that kind of quickly. But questions about that presentation? No. And I guess I don't know the process. I don't know if I send out a draft because I want to know what numbers you all want to see. I want to know what is helpful to you all to advise us as best as you can. I guess I can send out a draft to them. Is that something I can do? Yes, yeah. So I can send out a draft of what I would like to report and just look at it. You can respond privately if there's any other information that you would like to see, and I can get that included. But I want to be more data forward with you all.
I'm interested in knowing of the outcomes. How many of those are euthanasia?
Yeah, so I can definitely include that information. So again, I took the presentation that's been presented and just repurposed it for this. But the euthanasia numbers I can definitely include, and I think that we should include those numbers. But that's something that I'll work in. Sure.
You said to the ASLMR.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll be familiar with like the ASLMR accords. Do you use Pet Point in your shelter? Yeah. So for you all that don't work in a shelter, there's a few large companies that run data. 24 Pet Watch is one, and they own a couple reporting companies. Most shelters are going to use one of two, usually Chameleon or Pet Point software. It's super helpful because we're all kind of on the same page, and there's a specific way that we can report numbers and metrics. And generally, the most accepted guidelines is the ASLMR accords, which were approved long time ago. But it basically, what I would like to do is present our raw data. So tails in, tails out numbers. So every animal that came into our care and every animal that left our care. And that will give you kind of the raw data. And then I would like to utilize the ASLMR standard, which it takes out those animals that were, an animal that was hit by a car and there was nothing that we could do. It does not account for those animals in like a live release rate number. So that's what I would like to do is present both of those numbers to you. But yeah, the ASLMR report, it just makes it a little easier for us because we can categorize animals as, this animal came into us as unhealthy and untreatable. And the best outcome for that animal was euthanasia. So that's what I would like to move forward, is moving our reporting status to that.
Well, I don't know any other veterinarian services that are charitable. I belong to Little Rock Rescue. And they also have 2 animal hospitals, which is not. And Dallas Animal Services sends their injured animals.
Oh, really?
And many other shelters
Mm-hmm.
do the same. Right now, they're doing it.
Yeah, no passion.
But I don't know of any other in the state of Texas. So do you?
Without a shelter having a veterinarian, it makes it tough. So we contract all of our emergency care to a private veterinary hospital, which is fine, it works, but it is costly. Now, I will say that this hospital gives us a very, very nice discount, and they're super great to our staff. We can pretty much call 24 hours a day to help us or provide guidance, or their vets will come into our shelter and provide us best practices. Yeah, they're super, super great. And they've been very, very helpful in providing care. We've actually had several of the injured animals that we've sent to them have been adopted by their staff members over the last month, which is great. We love to see that. But North Dallas Vet makes it possible for us to provide a lot of this extra care. They're super, super great. But yeah, if you have the information, I would be more than happy to reach out to that hospital. Any other questions? We can move on to the next agenda item. Yeah.
We're all done with for shelter metrics, so we will proceed an update on the shelter.
Alrighty, so I know shelter expansion has been on everybody's mind, seems like for years and years and years. So I wanted to present our updated shelter capacity. And now I will say, you all have been to our shelter, I'm assuming. Yeah. But this is a kind of a bird's eye view of the original plan. Now and it's kind of hard to talk through, but some of this has already been repurposed. But I'll kind of walk through everything. So these are our front two cat adoption rooms. So this one is strictly for cats, adult cats that are able to co-house. This here is kind of an empty, we call it a flex room. So we have 3 of these flexible housing rooms, which are super, super nice. But this one right now is being used to house cats and kittens. And then we have 2 of these flexible rooms in the back. So currently this one is housing 2 large adult dogs that are able to be co-housed. And then this one also has adult cats in it. So the design of these rooms here is to be flexible to suit the purposes that we need. So during the winter months, when we have a larger population of adult dogs, we're able to retool those rooms to house adult dogs. During kitten season, we can repurpose it to house more kittens. So it's done intentionally, it's not done haphazardly. But this is kind of where the confusion comes in when we're calculating like an actual shelter capacity, because our building is flexible by design. The areas in blue are for our dogs. So these dogs here are viewable to the public. These generally have not been in the past. Staff now, and I would encourage you to walk in, not as an ASAC member, just as a member of the general public. But the staff will now greet you and walk you to this back area where we're housing these other animals. Because what we found is that these animals have stayed past their mandated hold time, and they were just kind of sitting back there until we have a kennel spot move up to be able to move up to the front.
Are they sitting in the blue area?
So this is so when you walk, these are our front doors. Yeah, and this is our adoption hallway, and then this blue area here is behind this room, and it's just a separate kennel room. But it's not accessible to the public because we have access control
The
here.
dogs that have been sitting there for a long time, you're waiting for.
They're waiting, Jim.
Are they sitting back here?
Yes, they are currently, which is, it makes
Small.
they're a little bit smaller, but it makes it difficult for our adoptions team because they want those animals to get the same visibility as the animals in front, because they're just as adoptable. We just don't have the physical capacity to have those animals seen by the general public. So staff now walks folks to the back and walks them through, but it's just, if you've ever walked back there, it's just a different feeling. The front of the house is a lot different than the back. Walking through the tunnels, it's a lot. Yeah, they're right there. It's very loud. It's dark, even with the lights on. So anyway, that's kind of one of the contention points with staff is, well, I don't have time to walk every visit, but it's necessary if we want to get those animals moved through the system. So this is our surgical suite here. We have a small bank of stainless steel kennels here for surgical recovery. We will occasionally utilize those. We have a neonate puppies or neonate kittens that need more advanced care. We can set them up in our surgical suite because it's a little bit quieter. But we'll set them up in there, but it's not used for general animal housing. These two rooms here are where this room is designated as a feral cat room. This room is just kind of general cat housing. I will say right now, this is our ringworm ward and this is our feline panleukopenia ward. So the very strict PPE protocols and isolation protocols. Fortunately, all of our ringworm cats are on the mend. And we've moved them through that process. And then we had two initial cats with feline panleukopenia that were brought in from the field. We noticed it pretty quickly, got them medical care. One of them made it, one did not, but this room that has now been cordoned off as panleukopenia room, and those animals are under isolation and hoping that they don't break with any symptoms. So we're, I think, on day 10 or 11 of that. So generally 14 days is the time period where they show symptoms. Hopefully we're almost through that as well. But these are cat housing rooms. This room here is the rabies quarantine area in the Sally Port. Have you all seen that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the difficulties of using that room, you're not able to open the door and step inside. So what we did is took those kennels apart and because I don't know if we've ever had 4 rabies cats at one time. So we took those kennels apart and rotated them sideways. So now you can go into the room and there's room to close the door behind you. And it's not great, still cramped, but you can go in and close that door so those animals don't escape.
Yeah, that whole back area is so depressing.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to stop by. We've done a lot of work in decluttering some of this stuff. So we've kind of identified what is usable, what is not usable, and we've been able to clean it out a little bit. But yeah, the rabies quarantine room is not, it's not great, but it works for our purposes now that we've kind of retooled it a little bit. So instead of those 4 big kennels, now there's 2 and they're rotated. So it works, it's better. There was a bank of stainless steel kennels here. They are still there. I am not a huge fan of cats in hallways in this transitional type space, especially where this is like designed as a medical intake area. And so having those animals there is stressful to them. It's not great from a disease standpoint. So we are working on getting them moved. And we had a plan in place, and then we had ringworm and panleukopenia and all the other things. So we were able to move some of those kennels, but there is still one small bank of kennels in the hallway. So, but those will be moved eventually, just because I don't like having those animals there. We have 4 isolation kennels here in the back. Those are for dogs that are undergoing any kind of medical treatment. They do get utilized occasionally if it's empty as stray overflow, but on a temporary basis. And then we have our state mandated quarantine area here in the back, which only gets used for rabies quarantine. But that's kind of the general flow of everything right now. Again, if you need a refresher, feel free to come in. Don't make it a forum, or we'll have to record it and all the things, but feel free to stop in and we can give you a tour of the shelter. But does anyone have any questions? And then we just identified here 25 total dog kennels. We have 25 total cat kennels, include all the stainless steel cages and the menagerie of different housing setups that we have. We have 2 cat rooms that we can house between 1 and 5 animals in, just depending on their socialization. And then we have 2 flex rooms that we just flex to meet our needs. But it's difficult to put an exact number on shelter capacity, because I can go through and I can count 1 animal per kennel, but that's rare that's how it's actually utilized. So we've set 70 as our capacity, because that's how many physical holding spaces we have for individual animals.
I just consider that back area just.
Well, and I will say that not having that huge bank of kennels in that hallway, we do still have 1 small bank, but that huge bank of kennels where all those cats were it was overwhelming for me, and I've been in hundreds of shelters. I'm like, okay, let's get those transitioned to be viewable to the public, because we had a lot of animals in the back of the house that were adoptable, and all we needed to do was roll those kennels out front and make them viewable to the public. So the back of the house is getting worked on. The surgical suite, there's very limited things that I can do myself, you know. We can move cages, we can move kennels, we can declutter, but the surgical suite is the one thing that there's not a ton that I can do myself.
And they're
So,
all on top of each other. We also talked about last meeting, you know, where what you call that? Where some puppies, my golden retriever rescue, we went there to rescue a golden and she had puppies, but they
Right.
died except for one because they got caught in that drain.
in the trench drain, yeah.
So I guess that was just,
Right, and that's something that we'll have to address with our staff is not having those pregnant animal, and there's not a ton I can do to fix the trench drain in our current setup. It's something Jennifer and I have had conversations about, and we've looked at different options for us to fix it. But the cost of that, and if we're gonna renovate, I think we would just like to lump it into whatever we end up doing during renovation.
yeah, maybe moving the pregnant dogs.
Right, but for in the time being, we can absolutely move those pregnant animals into our surgical suite, or we can move them anywhere.
Fabulous golden.
Yeah.
And
Um,
then the other thing is, are the raised dog beds?
Yeah.
We talked about that, so I don't know.
So that's not, so the raised dog beds we could do, but it would require us to renovate that trench drain because if you've not gone into the kennels, those beds flip up against the wall and it's just open underneath them. So if we were to just buy those beds, that bed would need somewhere to sit and it would fall into the drain in the back. Because it's just a long trench drain between the back of the kennels. There's nothing that prevents anything from going in there. So those legs of those Kuranda beds would just drop down into that. So it's something that we've looked at, and I did sign us up for the Kuranda bed giveaway, and then they basically will give shelters a discounted price and we can post them and the general public can buy those beds for us. But I have not made that public yet just because we don't have a way to set them up in our kennels just yet. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I think it's something that we'll be able to look at moving forward because we at some point will have to address, you know, that bedding structure, that flip up set that we have because the bottoms are starting to deteriorate. So that's something that we will have to address. But those Kuranda beds, I just can't make them fit right now, unfortunately. But it's something that's on the horizon. And then as far as the puppy situation, so I've instructed, so we have one staff member who does a lot of purchasing. And so we're gonna look at purchasing like a whelping pen setup that can sit inside one of the larger kennels that has those rubber rails so the puppies don't get smushed and then they won't be able to roll out of the back of those into the drain as well.
Those two
Oh, really?
years ago.
Yeah,
Made a lot of stuff.
really. Yeah, to my knowledge, we don't have any whelping pins right now, but it's something that we'll look at purchasing because again, they brought that up to me as well. And I didn't have a great solution other than just putting a whelping pin inside of one of our kennels, which we can do.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. And so this might be difficult to see. The numbers are a little bit small, but you've got them printed out in front of you. So this is our yearly average daily population from 2014 up to 2024 this year. So I will say our 2024 number may drop ever so slightly because we are in the height of kitten season. So it's averaging the animals, you know, to date. So year to date. We've had a lot more animals just by virtue of being in the middle of kitten season. So during the winter time, that number might lower a little bit and the average will drop, but that's what it is right now. I, however, don't anticipate it being as low as last year. I would think it will be somewhere similar to our 2024 numbers. But this is just the number of animals in our care on average per day. So it's broken down by dogs, cats. We've averaged around 20 to 25 dogs in custody or in our shelter that we're caring for. And then cats, it kind of flexes a lot right now. I think this morning when I looked, we had 60 cats in our care, but the average is around 50 or so. So this is just kind of how the shelter is trending. And then Christina, you can vouch for this, but COVID numbers are for most shelters are very skewed. They're much lower. So that's where that drop in numbers comes in, is those are kind of the COVID years when our shelter was not full. But you can see here, this number 70 is kind of our top line capacity. So pretty much every day we are at our designated capacity. And it's important for me to note too, that physical holding space is different than what, in my opinion, is different than what a shelter's true capacity is. It's the capacity for what I can provide humane care for. If we're not able to provide humane care, then our numbers drop. Fortunately, we have the staffing and the availability to provide housing for every single animal that's in our care. But just because a space is open in the shelter doesn't mean that we have the capacity to, to house an animal there. But right now, most of our kennels are pretty much full. A lot of animal shifting around going on the daily. And did anyone have any questions about this line graph? No. And then these are our future projections. So we took years that we could verify the City of Farmers Branch population size, and we compared that to our shelter intake numbers. And so I took a percentage of our intake versus the population. So HSUS, I used to work for them, so I use a lot of their numbers and my things, but HSUS generally estimates that per population, a shelter will take in around 3% of that total population size. So if, for the City of Farmers Branch, we just did this calculation and it's 3.236. So we were pretty much online with that 3% trend that HSUS identified. So we took the population size and just multiplied that by 3.236%, and we got our future projections and we mapped it out to 2045. So last year, which is the last full year of data that we had, we took in right at 1,400 animals. And then mapping it out to 2045, it should be around 1,600 if this trend keeps tracking.
That's neat.
And I took, so the data, this isn't all of our data points, but we did 2014, 2013, 2014, up to 2024. We had some anomalies in our population size, which was odd, but anyway, this 3.236 average stuck true pretty much for every single year. So we wanted to make sure, like Ben talked about, that we future-proof our shelter and we build for the future. And based on our projections and all of our internal data, this is the number that we would trend to over the next few years. So not a dramatic increase, but right now we're operating at kind of a baseline capacity. So anything more than that will substantially impact that. Anyone have any questions about this slide?
I just interested in growing apartments.
Yeah.
Those townhomes.
Right.
And they say that 70% residents have that.
Yeah, so I factored that into, I looked at a lot of different metrics on how to best calculate this number. The AVMA handbook says 66% of residents own pets. But the city hasn't gone so far as like projecting what our total apartment sizes is 20 and 2045. We've got some future projections, but they don't go this far out. But the AVMA handbook says that around 66% of residences own pets. So I would imagine that number will probably be more than this if the apartments keep trending the way that they do.
Good information.
Yeah. And then any questions about the presentation? And I know I threw a lot at you. I talk a lot, so that's.
It's good information.
Okay, so the last item on our agenda is an update on facility creation.
I am so excited to present this to you. I met all of you at our last ASAC meeting and was just about drinking from a fire hose. We had received notice from Sarah shortly before and heartbroken to lose her. We're in the process of posting the position so that we could bring in a new and incredible animal services manager. But I've had the opportunity through the interim before Tyler started, we had a little bit of a gap, and so I was able to spend a lot of time with staff and operationally spending at least 51% of my time at the shelter every single week. So that I could learn operations, I could understand what they're going through, some of those needs that we were able to see. We did also reach out to some of those recommended organizations for capacity, for needs assessments, looking at some of those costs were 8,000 to, we were told if your purchasing limit is 50, then we'll keep it right at 49. So there was a big range, and many of them wanted a combined partnership. And actually Tyler and I had this discussion, I think it was a week after you accepted the job, but before you had started. But many of them had shared, that they would love to do the architectural design in coordination with that needs assessment. They wouldn't want to do them separately. So that was a little bit of a frustration point just for us as I was going through putting these bones together. Our deputy city manager and I, Joria, are going to take on part of this project, the shelter expansion project, so that Tyler, as you all know, is in operations, and he's doing an incredible job building up in the areas that we were weaker in. And we don't want to burden him with anything more, because all my biggest concern is wanting to make sure that our shelter is operating at its best. And I know Tyler has an incredible job and is doing an incredible job at that. I don't want to burden him with an additional project. So our deputy city manager and I are working with our finance, fleet, facilities, and fund. They call themselves the 4 Fs, with our finance, fleet, facilities department to work on this potential expansion. We did do some significant research since the last time that we met. So we reviewed previous quotes, designs, plans, and presentations from 2015 and on. Since Ben had shared earlier, there were some presentations that, like, in 2009 was our grand opening. 2015, 14, I found a few discussions, but 2015, I started projecting and sharing some of those projections. Like Tyler has shared, some of those numbers are a little bit difficult and a little bit skewed. I know Ben talked about them. It's difficult. Our shelter was built for some of those flex rooms, and sometimes that room has held one animal. I know in January, when I first started with the city, there were only cats in the very first room as you walk in, and there was nothing in room 2, 3, and 4 on your right side. So we were just at a lower point, it was a little calmer. We've seen it where we had 2 bunnies in room 3, and then we had 2 puppy dogs that came in. We've had an entire litter, a mom and her litter of cats. So those rooms can back kind of flex, and that's something that we wouldn't want to lose completely, because that has been an area that has been beneficial for us. However, like you said, Christy, that there is no drainage on that right side. So flipping those into dog rooms in order to expand is something that we're trying to consider. That's going to be an expensive purchase if we're needing to dig out drainage and connect our existing system, and can our existing system hold that much more intake. So we reviewed quite a bit of this, met with different departments, our planning department on what we can do with our lot. As Ben spoke about, that back drop off. So this area right here on this back side drops down quite a bit as you're going to, that's Brookhaven behind it, Brookhaven Community College. And it doesn't show in this version, but there is right across here, right across that back driveway is an easement. So anything back there, we really can't build through that easement. We wouldn't want to in case there was a need for them to disrupt that. So this back section is off limits based off the utility easements that are currently there. There's electrical lines. I'm sure you've been able to see it up in those trees. They were impacted by the storms just as the rest of the community was. So some of them have come down since then. But we are reviewing some of these areas. We've reviewed the bequests with the permanent item funding specifics with legal. So met with legal on one of the large donation that Ben had spoke about earlier. We received a significant donation in a will, and that was received, I believe it was the end of 23, that was received by council. And so end of 22, it's fiscal year 22, 23, there we go. The end of calendar year 22, and that was received, and it has been placed in holding for that permanent item. That will did have some specific language, so we want to make sure that if we are using that we're honoring that wonderful and generous donation that we received. So we have started meeting with architects to review our current site and layout limitations. We've not secured anything yet with one specific architect, but just talking about that with Forum, who was our original architect for the facility. They designed it, they have everything in house. And so they knew the plans and knew the limitations already. We've also met with some of the others that our city has used on various projects, vertical projects. And then we're exploring quotes for those needs assessments and design. A little bit of disappointment on some of those because they were significantly more money than we expected. And after, I think I reached out to you, Christina, on some internal needs assessments that we did. Just as we're walking through the shelter, we all see some of those needs. And as we're talking to officers, spending time with officers, spending time with Tyler, even shadowing over there and just spending time over there, you see some of the intricacies, you see some of the frustration points. In our wonderful revisit with Operation Kindness, our partnership there, we were able to revisit when they come to surgery. So we shifted that all to on Mondays when we're close to the public. So that's been a beneficial impact because it reduces that amount of traffic that our staff is not handling public foot traffic, but also inputting of all of that medical data and assisting back there. But that also reduces the amount of just the number of people in the building so that we're able to kind of control that just a little bit more. Also visited a couple of different shelters, just seeing flows and operations, and that may be something that we explore as an ASAC committee as we go drop into some of our maybe great funds shelter. But as we drop into those other areas, just looking at what we see, what we like, operationally, what are the things that we're a fan of? What are the things that we know that we'd like to see somebody doing something that meets the needs that we have. So we've also discussed this just lightly so far as we move further in this timetable, exploring some of those operational impacts. If we're looking at expansion, what does that look like for our operations? What does that look like for the animals that we currently have in our care or that we would have in our care in the future? So you can see we're at capacity right now. We would love to start this in a little bit slower season, maybe not when we're receiving boxes full of kittens daily. I think the day that Tyler started, or maybe a few days after, we received 2 or 3 boxes of kittens. Yeah. Found at a car wash here in Farmers Branch, found at a dumpster here in Farmers Branch, and then found elsewhere. So there's just a lot going on in those things, and we don't want to negatively impact operations. So we've discussed the potential of doing some phasing of construction, whether we build our cat wings specifically first so that we can move them over, and then we build something else, but just some phasing so we're not negatively impacting operations, and then maybe the potential with some ILAs or some NOVs with some of our local shelters. Addison, our next door neighbor, doesn't have a shelter, and so I know they're exploring those opportunities. We do have others close by. Carrollton and Louisville are doing great work. Some of our contacts have been there as well. And then last is design approval and construction starting in fiscal year 24-25. That was a previous date that had been provided, and so I think we're still able to start on that. I'm excited to continue to move this process forward. I'm excited to be able to share that there was much more going on than I was aware of. Thankfully, Fleet Facilities was working on some of this already, but then just digging deep into some of the information that had previously been shared. I know there had been discussions and some hand-done drawing. There had been some discussions of hiring an architect in the past. It looked like 2015 that was discussed, and then again in 2018, 2019. And projections for a full-blown renovation were discussed in, I believe, 2018, 2019, and it was $2.5 to $3 million projected at that time.
But we have an internal architect that's fabulous. I'm surprised. Is he just so busy he couldn't look at it? Matt? Most everybody in the city knows him but me.
Oh.
But anyway, he's an awesome architect.
Okay.
I'm just wondering.
That'll be interesting. I know we've explored a couple of different architectural organizations so far. We did try to focus initially on those that have had familiarity with shelters specifically, because there are some different needs that a shelter has that.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That we don't have, you don't have this building, the drains, that's something that is specific, ensuring that we have water, ability for that to flow. Yes, for it to go the right way, for us to not have clogs and things like that can impact operations.
Can I talk on that?
Yes, absolutely.
So our shelter in El Paso was designed by a company who designed office buildings. And it was extremely, after the first year, they were in not a similar situation, looking at a revamp. They are going to have to raise the entire facility and build a brand new shelter. Because they utilized a company that the city they built all the office buildings, and they said, why can they not build an animal shelter?
No,
They did not have adequate HVAC, drain. It's
it's a whole
it
different
was
ballgame.
tenuous, yeah.
Pretty sure that happened in, like the Tri-City area.
So whether we,
Shelters are, they are unique. They're not a normal architectural.
whether we go with, and that would be a council decision depending on the cost of the architectural firm, depending on where we hit there. But whether they are shelter specific, I know we looked at Shelter Planners of America, there were a couple of others that were out there. Whether they're shelter specific or they're just amenable to having these really in-depth conversations of some of these needs and understanding. I think that's been one of the benefits so far is just meeting with some of these local architects that we've used in other projects and them seeing specifically there are some differences here that are unlike, like you said, unlike an office building, unlike City Hall, unlike even a fire station.
I have a question. I know I said I wasn't gonna speak, but I trade and then I used to work with quarter of a century ago. Do you know like the extent that you have for those plans that were drawn up in 2008, like not just architectural, but plumbing and like the engineering plans, and if you got any kind of geotechnical to see like what the soil conditions are and stuff?
I don't have that level of detail, but I know that we can provide those over to our planning department and they could say if that is, if we have that level of detail in that. I am not an architect or an engineer by trade, so I wouldn't want to speak to that, but they could look at that and tell me.
I have a bunch of stuff that's rolled up, a bunch of big papers that's rolled up in a thing in my office.
40 to 60 pages
Yeah.
and it did two of these. So we've got some pretty in-depth original drawings. Went all the way back to our grand opening checklist and things like that we had. So I was able to do a lot of digging and research, which has been a primary component of my position as an A2, is doing that digging and research for other departments so they can continue their operations and I'm in the background supporting them. So some of their priority areas that we've discussed with staff, after giving Tyler a little bit of time to get adjusted and to get operationally involved. I know he's been kind of thrown into the deep end in operations, but these are areas that staff had shared, and I think that Tyler could corroborate. Is priority one is that expand our humane housing capacity. We know that number that Tyler shared. We're right on that 70 right now. We border that. We had a lot of cats here recently, and that's going to impact it. Their length of stay is a lot longer. If they're a neonate and need to be here a little bit longer, thankfully he's been working really hard on the foster program, and so that's reducing that capacity and hopefully their foster fails and they stay at their homes as well. The separate cat area, I know we discussed that as we toured last time or following our last meeting, but as we walk down that hallway, we see those dogs and we see those cats. We know that stress level is impacted. Our staff agree with that. Our kennel techs 100% agree with that. We've talked about the pheromone plugins, just like the little air freshener that you plug in to reduce that. We've put up different papers to block papering to block the view, just so, especially if we have an easily aggravated animal, that they're not aggravated just looking at each other, because we want to reduce that. And that was actually something that was specific to the donor's request, was that we have a separate cat area, cat wing. I think that we'll be able to get there, and I'm really excited about some potential opportunities to shift that so that we can get the cats into a different area. As Tyler shared earlier, there's some unique capacity concerns with our cats. We don't want one big open room like this with 40 cats in there. That would be really terrible if we had some type of outbreak, because all 40 cats would then need to be quarantined. It's a potential. We've seen it in as we've discussed with some other shelters, or as I had discussed with other shelters, those large room cat areas can be a negative. As much as you can say we can put 40 cats in this area, if something were to happen, that might be 40 cats that would need to be euthanized, which is terrible for our community. It's terrible for our residents. It's terrible for our staff. That's not something that they would want to choose, and it would be pretty difficult. We've seen some of our neighboring communities have to make those difficult decisions. So our hope is that we can create separate cat area or separate cat wing where there's divided off rooms, might be smaller than what our current rooms are. We're still exploring some of those options, what that would look like, but to be able to have, 4 or 5 in different areas, but all in a cat wing that's separate from the dogs, so they're not seeing each other 24/7. And then priority 3, I did not want to to make a choice on this, and I think that there are some unique opportunities here. We do see that surgical area updates as a need. We also know that our play yard desperately needs improvement. You've walked back there, if you've seen it, if you pull up to the backside, you can smell some of the concerns there. We have doused gallons of rescue into that to really, or I'm sorry, not rescue,
Like
enzyme reducer,
enzymatic cleaner.
breaking that down. But there are some concerns. It's older. It's used every single day, every 15 to 10 minutes right now because of the heat. There we go. Every 10 to 15 minutes or so, from animals in and out back here, and getting them exercise, getting them a safe place that they can run around. But then also making sure there's some shade structures. Yes, I know Sarah in the past had purchased time after time some of those temporary awnings or outdoor umbrellas, and we're hopeful that we can do some type of permanent solution. Permanent, knock on wood, based on the winds and the weather. Y'all know the storm at the very end of May shredded some of those permanent structures in other areas in other cities. That shade structure, there's one near my house that was shredded at a playground, just because of the amount of wind and trees that were impacted. But those are in areas we didn't want to prioritize one over the other, so we threw it in as 3A and 3B. I think that surgical area updates, if we're able to move some of our cats to a front area, there's a possibility that our current cat ISO and quarantine, or current cat, isolation and feral cat, yeah.
They're both isolation.
Right now, those 2 rooms, we're hopeful that those could be turned into an additional medical area, whether that's a pre-op, post-op area, or it's an area that so that our animals, when they're coming in, they can get kind of triaged in an area that's a little bit calmer and not a walk-through area. That is it on this one. Any questions?
This is really good.
If there's no further items, I would make a motion to.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Any opposed? We can hear that 1:30.
Right on time.
Let's stop sharing and stop recording.